Hey my friends, this is Freddy, and today we're going to talk hydroxychloroquine.
The anti-malarial drug, hydroxychloroquine.
Hydroxychloroquine. Hydroxychloroquine.
This drug could save lives.
Hydroxychloroquine.
Anecdotal reports.
Hydrochloroquine.
Chloroquine.
Chloroquine.
Hydroxychloroquine.
Chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine.
So how did this drug become the most hyped possible treatment for COVID-19? Well, that's a story including a shady lawyer from Long Island, a weird professor from southern France, and President Donald J. Trump. Shortly after the virus hit China at the beginning of the year, Chinese scientists were already suspecting hydroxychloroquine as a possible treatment. But they only published preliminary findings and couldn't prove the effect the drug had on the virus. Most scientists were focused on a drug called Calatra, which had already showed good results with the SARS pandemic back in 2003. But on March 13th, this happened.
But what if there's already a cheap and widely available medication that's on the market to treat the virus? Well, according to a new study, there is such a drug. It's called chloroquine. And that study found that use of chloroquine and its tablets is showing favorable outcomes in humans infected with coronavirus, including faster time to recovery and shorter hospital stays. CDC research shows that chloroquine also has strong potential as a prophylactic, preventative measure against coronavirus in the lab, and while we wait for a vaccine to be developed.
This is Fox News host Laura Ingraham on her show on March 16th, citing a study that was published on March 13th on Twitter with the name An Effective Treatment for the Coronavirus COVID-19. It claims that the hydroxychloroquine is showing promising results with people affected with the coronavirus. But the tweet with the study attached didn't get lots of traction until the afternoon of March 16th, when SpaceX and Tesla CEO Elon Musk found the tweet, retweeted it, and gave it a landslide distribution around the world. And only hours later, Laura Ingraham reported about it on her show. But if you take a closer look at this so-called study, you quickly realize that it's just one big fraud. Because it's a Word document trying to imitate the form and shape of a scientific paper, while at the same time only citing studies from South Korea and China without adding any new information to it. Moreover, it uses phone discussions and videos as viable sources. And on top of that, the document was never peer-reviewed, meaning that experts from the same field evaluate the work, and thus never got published in a scientific journal. So when Laura Ingraham considers a non-reviewed document published on Twitter a scientific study, then it's just false, it's fake news. The document was removed from Twitter and Google on March 19th because it violated its terms and conditions. But that means that the authors of the study were actually impersonating or representing an authority or institution they had no connection to. The alleged first author of the study, a Professor Thomas A. Brooker, was contacted by Wired magazine and responded this via email. "I've neither contributed to, wrote any part of, nor had knowledge of this Google.com document. I've never conducted research on RNA virus pathogens. I have no professional credentials or authority to suggest or recommend clinical trials or practices. All of my scientific publications are processed through peer review. I suggest that you communicate with one of the actual authors." Yes, good question. Who are the real authors? The second author of the document is the same person who tweeted out the study in the first place. And his name is James Todaro. He got an MD from Columbia, became an ophthalmologist, but hasn't seen lots of patients lately, because quickly after residency, he turned into a Bitcoin investor. And today he's a managing partner at a cryptocurrency firm called Blacktown Capital, and he became interested in collaborating with the document. Contacted by Wired magazine, he stated this: "I added stuff that pertained more to the medical side of things, and gave a more, I guess, clinical feel to it." Asked about Professor Brooker's statement that he wasn't involved in the creation of the document, Todaro said, "I don't personally know Tom Brooker. My correspondence has been with Mr. Regano. Mr. Regano is the third and last author of the study. But who's this apparent mastermind behind this weird document?"
Fortunately, there's some good news to report tonight on that front. Early evidence suggests that chloroquine, that's a cheap anti-malaria drug, may be effective in treating coronavirus. Gregory Regano is an advisor of the Stanford University School of Medicine, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Regano, thanks so much for coming on. So tell us what this is and why you think it's promising, please.
So the president has the authority to authorize the use of hydroxychloroquine against coronavirus immediately.
This is a clip of Mr. Regano appearing on Tucker Carlson's show on Fox News, advocating the use of hydroxychloroquine. But there is one big problem. He's not a physician, nor is he associated with the Stanford School of Medicine, as claimed by Tucker in the first part of the clip. In reality, he's a 34-year-old lawyer from Melville on Long Island, working at his parents' law firm, Regano LLC, and interested in cryptocurrency. Moreover, he set up a company called Jonas Research LLC on February 11th, just when the pandemic started, and it's not clear what this company is actually researching. Asked by Wired magazine about his background, he had this to say: "I have a very unique background at the crossroads of law and science. I've been working with large pharmaceutical companies, universities, biotechs, and nonprofits in the development of drugs and medical products." He claims that those contacts told him about the use of hydroxychloroquine in South Korea and China against the coronavirus. So he started to read up about it. Before the crisis, he had been promoting a low-cost, high-tech alternative to the traditional way of how pharmaceutical companies develop and patent drugs. In 2019, he published a paper about his main idea, which the Los Angeles magazine nicely summarized: a way for those interested in curing a disease to come together without institutional barriers. A blockchain system would provide proof of each person, company, or institution's contribution. This could entitle them to profit if research led to patent and care. So when the pandemic came, Mr. Regano quickly realized the potential market of this hydroxychloroquine drug. He put together his fake document and gave it to Darrow, who gave it a more scientific spin and more scientific credibility. But in the end, they needed another big player to support their idea. So let's Mr. Regano tell himself who they found.
And I'm here to report that as of this morning, about 5 o'clock this morning, a well-controlled, peer-reviewed study carried out by the most eminent infectious disease specialist in the world, Didier Raoult, MD, PhD, out of the south of France, in which he enrolled 40 patients, again, a well-controlled, peer-reviewed study that showed a 100% cure rate against coronavirus.
Professor Didier Raoult is one of the most controversial figures in infectious diseases, not only in France, where he lives and practices, but all around the world. And while being a renowned expert for certain bacteria and their treatment, his team has faced serious allegations of sexual harassment and intimidation at the workplace. This was investigated in 2017, and in 2006, his team was banned from publishing in journals of the American Society of Microbiology because he falsifies results in an experiment. So the same day Mr. Regano announced the magical cure of coronavirus with hydroxychloroquine, Professor Raoult released his study, which is basically as weak as the Word document. And the crazy part is that he published it in the International Journal of Microbial Agents, whose editor-in-chief is a person called Jean-Marc Roulin, and he is even a co-author of the study itself. So while the publishing strategy is already very shady, the paper itself is a perfect example of how not to perform a clinical trial. Because when you want to see whether a drug has an effect on a sick person or not, you need two different groups. You need a group that takes the drug and a group that doesn't take the drug. And then you need to follow three basic principles. The first principle is that the randomized controlled study is double-blind, basically meaning that neither the doctor nor the patients know whether they are receiving the drug or not. Number two, the study has to be randomized, meaning that the doctor doesn't decide who goes into which group. This is randomly selected. Number three, the study has to be controlled, meaning that the control group and the group that takes the drug has the same age, the same size, and has the same health status. Raoult's study didn't follow any of these rules. Number one, it wasn't double-blinded, because Raoult knew exactly which patients received the drug and which not. Number two, it wasn't randomized, because he personally selected people from his hospital to be in the group who took the drug, while the control group was made out of patients from the surrounding hospitals. And it wasn't controlled, because there was a big age difference between the control group and the group who got the drug. And on top of that, a few patients received an antibiotic called azithromycin, making it basically impossible to know which effect is attributed to which drug. Experts around the world have debunked this highly deficient study, but why are people still considering hydroxychloroquine as the ultimate cure? Well, only hours after Regano was on Tucker Carlson's show, this happened.
A drug called chloroquine, and some people would add to it hydroxychloroquine. And it's shown very encouraging, very encouraging early results. And we're going to be able to make that drug available almost immediately.
Yes, the President of the United States of America watched Fox News and allegedly contacted Tucker Carlson after the show. And this is not the first time that the President uses Fox News as his primary source of information. But the biggest deal is that Trump publicly endorsed a drug that until now has no proven effect on the disease. And this might have potentially dangerous consequences, because people start to self-medicate with a drug, and emergency rooms are already reporting of people showing up with overdoses. And it's also dangerous for patients who are suffering from autoimmune diseases like lupus, who need the drug on a daily basis. They might find themselves deprived of access to the drug. Meanwhile, Professor Raoult has jumped on the Fox train as well, giving interviews to highly controversial Dr. Oz, which is a doctor that has misled America about nutritional supplements a few years ago. Comedian John Arnold did an episode on his show about it.
You know, day by day, we saw the result comparing hydroxychloroquine and hydroxychloroquine plus azithromycin, and very rapidly we saw that there was a difference.
I spoke exclusively to Dr. Didier Raoult, one of the top infectious disease specialists in the world, who led the clinical trial.
Was there a clinical outcome difference in the patients?
We specifically are looking on this. So I expect next week we get a paper that report the clinical effects.
Are you optimistic that you'll show clinical benefit?
Oh, very optimistic.
Raoult, Regano and Todaro are now cooperating on a project called covidtrial.eu, a website where they are trying to find more supporters for more trials for hydroxychloroquine. The famous Word document can still be found on that same website, but with slight differences. They had to remove references to Professor Brooker and Stanford University after complaints. Raoult itself received the highest honor a week ago when French President Emmanuel Macron visited him in his laboratory. And that way he can add another picture of him and the French president to his collection on the wall in his office. And the most disappointing fact is that even highly intelligent people, like Professor Raoult, are not using their power and knowledge that they have to do real science during the crisis in order to find a real treatment. Instead of helping and cooperating with his colleagues, he chose to publish a close to fraudulent paper only to push his own ego and narrative. And it doesn't surprise me that one of his former students quoted him saying, "What I'm saying, that's what's right." And he didn't even hesitate to cooperate with a proven conman lawyer from Long Island named Regano, giving people with dubious motivations a stage. But unfortunately, in the times of Donald Trump and the era of alternative facts, this is the reality, even in the medical field. But I hope that at some point, truth will prevail. This is Freddy, watching closely. Bye.